Thank you, Dick, and welcome back. Our journalist and editor, Pat McGuigan, political observer and commentator Larry Stein, and journalist and editor Arnold Hamilton. Again, we're taking your questions and comments on Twitter at OK Votes and by email at onr@oeta.tv. And I must say to the folks who have been tweeting some of these messages we can't repeat, but there's some very nice, kind words. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it very much. Okay, we've got some new information about what's going on with the numbers. What have you heard, Pat?
Well, Paul Zirax, the election board secretary, told me about 10 minutes ago that they had a problem instantly when they began importing the absentee and early voting numbers. It locked up the system and it's not streaming through to the screen. But what they are getting results, they're not transporting through. So what they're going to do is create hard copy PDFs and start putting them up on their screen. So we'll be able to start getting numbers, but it's going to be like the old days, Bob.
Well, hey, the old days still work. Pen and pencil do work, by golly. And we should point out that we do have a couple of our staffers back in the news area entering things by hand, the old-fashioned way. So we're doing that right now. I wanted to catch that just passed. Maybe somebody in the control room could tell me about House District 59. I'd just like to know where that one sits. Okay. Any surprises for you guys? Any thoughts here as we're kind of starting to wind down this night?
Bridenstine.
big
Still leading with
deal.
about a quarter of the vote in. I think it's early, but that's kind of a surprise. Now, he's an attractive candidate. He was articulate. He stopped by and talked to the reporters when he filed. And I said, you know, this kid could go somewhere. Well, it looks like he is going somewhere so far tonight. We'll see where it winds up.
I would say Brian Crain in Tulsa. He's not faring well, it doesn't look like, and he seems to be one who didn't escape the Tea Party challenge tonight. Everybody else seemed to, but not him.
I wonder why. I mean, why? Why does one get caught up and the others don't? Is it just the luck of the draw, or?
Roll the dice, baby needs shoes. You know, you never know.
Every election is personal and it's individualized and it's that district.
You may not remember what people say, but you remember how they make you feel. And if you can make that connection with voters, you can win these elections. But the things I think are interesting are the way the challengers that challenged and came very close. I mean, the Daney race up in Edmond and the Clark-Jolley race, you know, a couple of hundred votes here, 1,000 votes here. You know, those things for incumbents, especially one who's the chairman of the Appropriations and Budget Committee, it's amazing that he even had a challenge.
Well, what's the latest? Was he down at the 56, 57 percentage? That's still pretty strong.
Yeah. Still pretty strong. Al, you know, it is the way things go sometimes. All politics are local. And Liz Exon, in her story about those two candidates that we were just discussing, about Crain and McDougal, they were really out working the streets hard. Yeah. And when they're putting that much shoe leather on the pavement, it makes a difference. So.
Well, the other thing is in the Clark, Jolley, and Paul Blair race, I mean, there was a ton of money from a third party that I think, you know, if Paul Blair lost tonight, but if he goes to court, I think he's going to come out with a couple of $1 million in a slander case.
You think he's going to win that one?
I think he could.
Okay, well, we'll see.
It's pretty thin stuff, and they've been repeating it over and over.
Exactly.
And I guess a lot of people are buying it. Now, it was always going to be a competitive race because these are two icons in Edmond.
Exactly.
Arnold, you were kind of sneering at that. Did you have a thought there?
No. It's pretty hard, I think, to make a case stick like that. The Crain seat also was a little different, too, because his boundaries weren't quite the same as before. And I think he had some new areas that he was dealing with there as well, did he not?
Yes, he had some new. And Crain is mild-mannered. What's interesting to me is he, in some ways, was heroic in walking the plank on the toughest pro-life issue of the last year, and yet voters don't seem to be, at this point, rewarding him.
Well, he didn't win. So
that's what I'm saying, is that in that case it was a Tea Party oriented challenge, but Crain didn't appear to get the credit for working on that issue. Maybe
he
got some blame.
appeared to me to be a reluctant warrior, though, in that he was attempting to sort of inoculate himself from those challenges on the ultra-right, that he was not conservative enough, and I think it ended up costing him probably tonight.
Okay. Trial lawyers form groups to defeat lawmakers who voted for changing the civil justice system. Interesting story. Trial lawyers donating to PACs that give money to conservative Republicans. Conservative Republicans who don't like the caps that were put on civil civil suits, civil cases.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also another thing that's interesting is them using the names of James Madison, because Madison was a Democratic governance guy. Okay, he believed that except for the areas you shield off that Democratic majorities through their elected representatives could guide public policy. And the basic argument that's being made by these groups is that they want to take the status quo and maybe even roll back some of the status quo in terms of tort law,
right,
and put it back into place and inoculate it from the reach of majorities through elected representation.
Yeah, the Seventh Amendment Christian Coalition, the Defenders of the Constitution,
trial by
and
jury
the
is
James
a-
Madison Political Action Committee.
Yeah, trial by jury is a core right. There's no doubt about that. But since the beginning of our country, there have been ways to get out of and avoid jury trials, just plea bargains, you know, you name it. So this is an interesting proposition for conservative circles, and I'm talking too much.
But it's kind of like
No, it's okay. Go ahead,
But it's
Larry.
kind of like the officer and gentleman. I got no place else to go. You know, they've got no other, you've got to play in the sandbox, and that's the sandbox with the Republicans.
Well,
now
and
in charge.
Neva Hill made the point in this particular article. He says they figured out if they want to get in the game, they got to do it in the Republican primaries.
And remember, we're talking about maybe 7 or 6% of the Republican voters in a primary. So you only got to get 3% plus 1 vote to be able to win. And then you're going to have some access, not necessarily influence, but access to the guy who's the new person in there.
Well, there's a thread in the constitutional conservative rhetoric that I just touched on that as a constitutional conservative I would quarrel with, and that's a good example of it. It's the old argument between Bernie Segan at San Diego University and Robert Bork, the 1987 Supreme Court nominee, Bork being a majoritarian, Segan being a libertarian. And the twain don't always meet.
Right.
But it is curious, because what we're seeing is with the confluence of more Republicans, that's where the trial lawyers are going to go and give their money, and they may be conservative trial
Gotta go
lawyers trying to
someplace.
influence. Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to House District 59 in the next panel. We're out of time for this one, and this concludes your guys' show for tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it, and I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you,
start
gentlemen,
showing
very,
the
very
mail
much.
pieces
Ah,
here,
he's
you
got
know.
it all there on the table. Remember, you can join the conversation still. We have one more interactive panel to go. That's at Twitter. Go to Twitter, OK Votes, or our email is onr@oeta.tv. And now back to Dick.